Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to my channel, Internal Audit Lab by Nausheen. Today I will discuss the rest of the topics of independence and objectivity, that are impairment to independence, impairment to objectivity, and policies that promote objectivity. Among this topic, impairment to objectivity and policies that promote objectivity will be tested in the exam in proficient aspect, but impairment to independence will be tested in the exam in basic aspect. So let's begin the video. So with the word impairment, we usually mean any sort of diminishment, reduction, or loss of value or loss of capacity. So the impairment is a negative word itself. Impairment to independence or objectivity happens when the internal audit activity or the internal auditors cannot perform their duty in a full capacity or in a full-fledged way. So these impairment situations generally include self-interest, self-review, familiarity, bias, or undue influence. This impairment situation may include but not limited to personal conflict of interest, scope limitation, resource limitation, or if any restriction is imposed on the access to records, personnel, or properties. So as per the implementation guide 1130, there are some examples of organizational independence impairment, which are firstly, if the CE has a broader functional responsibility than internal audit and execute an audit of a functional area that is also under the CE's oversight. Let's say, for example, if Chief Audit Executive has a other operational responsibility. For example, he or she may be a head of any other department other than the internal audit, and if he or she perform audit of that department, then it is surely an impairment to organizational independence because that area is under the CE's oversight. Secondly, if the CE supervisor has broader responsibility than internal audit and the CE executes an audit within his or her supervisor functional responsibility. Similarly, if Chief Audit Executive Supervisor has operational responsibility, let's say for example, the supervisor may be a head of the department of any other function, and if the CA perform audit of the department, then it will be an impairment to organizational independence. Thirdly, if the CA does not have direct communication or interaction with the board. As we know that for ensuring the independence, CE should have unrestricted access to the board. But if he or she does not have that access, direct communication or interaction with the board, then it will be an impairment to organizational independence. And lastly, if the budget for the internal activity is reduced to such extent that the department cannot fulfill its responsibilities as outlined in the charter. Let's say, for example, if the CA wants to hire two CIS for his department, but the management is saying that no, you cannot do that because if you hire the professional, then it will require a higher amount of budget. So these type of limitations are surely an impairment to organizational independence. Here are some common impairments of independence and objectivity, which include a personal conflict of interest, scope limitation, resource limitation, the situation where the auditor is assessing operations for which they are previously responsible, assurance engagement for function over which the CA previously had responsibility, and consulting engagement in areas where assurance engagement are also performed. Now I am describing this situation one by one. The conflict of interest. As per the Attribute Standard 1120, internal auditor must have an impartial, unbiased attitude and avoid any sort of conflict of interest. So what is meant by conflict of interest? So firstly, conflict of interest is a situation in which where a person has a competing professional or personal interest. Let's say, for example, if the internal auditor is involved in an insider trading, he or she may trade one of the confidential information to third party or outsider for his personal gain. So this sort of insider trading is a conflict of interest situation. Then conflict of interest exists even if no unethical or improper act result. Yes, even there is a no unethical act or no improper act exists, there might be a conflict of interest. For example, internal auditor is going to audit in a procurement department, and in a procurement department, the line manager is his uh, close friend or a childhood friend. So if he or she he audits this area, then it will be a conflict of interest. Here no unethical act exists, but due to this situation conflict of interest arises. Then conflict of interest create an appearance of impropriety that can undermine confidence in the internal auditor, the internal activity, and the profession. Let's say, for example, if the management consider the internal department a very dumb department, only the dumb persons work in this department, and they have a very narrow view towards the department. So such type of view of management can undermine the confidence in the internal auditor, the internal audit activity, and the profession. And lastly, conflict of interest could impair an individual's ability to perform his or her duties or responsibility objectively. Yes, if the internal auditor cannot perform his duty and responsibilities objectively, then surely it's the conflict of interest. Let's say, for example, internal audit goes to sales department for audit, and the sales manager is saying that here the senior management is his very close, and if he reports any negative observation, gives any negative issues, then he will report this to senior management and will tell senior management to hold his promotion. So such type of threatening activity may perform the internal auditor to perform his duties objectively, perform a quality work, because he may hesitate to report any negative issues against that department. So these are the example of conflict of interest. So if there is a conflict of interest exists in an assurance engagement, then it should be removed, and auditor can be reassigned back to that engagement only when that conflict of interest is resolved. But in case of consulting engagement, internal auditor needs to disclose this conflict of interest to the client, and if the client has no objection, then the auditor can be assigned to that audit. The scope limitations. What are the example of scope limitation? For example, a scope defined in the internal audit charter. That means whatever the scope defined in the internal audit charter, the internal audit can perform the work as per that scope. That is scope limitations. Then a scope restriction means if the internal audit activity cannot access to records, personnel, and the properties. Then if the auditor cannot perform their engagement as per their work schedule or cannot perform the necessary engagement procedure, and also if there is a approved staffing plan, and if the work is not performed as per the staffing plan or financial budget, then it is also scope limitations. Remember that if there is any scope limitation, then it should be reported to the board, and preferably in a written form. The resource limitations. What are the types of resource limitation? Let's say internal audit department is not given the adequate staff, the quality staff, then it is a resource limitation. Then they are not given the on-the-job training or outside training, that is insufficient training, that are also resource limitations. If outdated technology is used, they are not given the proper laptops, they are not given the latest software. So these are the resource limitations. So because of these resource limitations, also objectivity can be impaired. Now come to the situation where the auditor is assessing operations for which they were previously responsible. Okay, if the internal auditor is responsible for any operational duty, then he cannot perform the audit of that area at least 1 year has been elapsed. But if he performed audit before 1 year elapsed, then it will be an impairment to objectivity. Then objectivity is also impaired when an internal auditor audits the area for which he or she will have the future responsibility within 1 year after the engagement. Now, assurance engagement for functions over which CA previously had responsibility. Already I described about this matter, that assurance engagement functions over which Chief Audit Executive has responsibility. Chief Audit Executive cannot do audit on this area, and this audit must be carried out by a third party or anyone outside the internal audit activity. Now, the consulting engagement in areas where assurance engagement are also performed. The internal audit activity may provide assurance services where it has previously performed the consulting services. So that means if internal auditor previously provide consulting services, then he or she may provide the assurance services. But after the assurance, if assurance services provide, then after that consulting service cannot be provided at least 1 year elapsed. Also, internal auditor can provide consulting services in the areas for which they had previous operational responsibilities. And also, if internal auditor have potential impairment to independence objectivity relating to proposed consulting services, disclosure must be made to the engagement client prior to accepting the engagement. Some important points you have to remember. Internal auditor cannot receive any material gift from anyone, but can receive the materials which are available for all the people. That is usually pen, calendar, or any sample. These are the items we can receive in general. So internal auditor can also receive this. But if internal auditors are offered any material piece or gift, then it should be reported to their supervisor immediately. Then internal auditor objectivity is not impaired when auditor recommends any standards of control for system or review any procedure before they are implemented. Internal auditor can do that. These are not an impairment to objectivity, but the things that should be remembered, that is, internal auditor cannot design, install, draft, or implement any procedure, otherwise objectivity will be impaired. Now, how internal auditor can maintain and promoting the objectivity? CA may conduct periodic query to internal auditor. That is, CA may send a questionnaire to internal auditor that whether any conflict of situation exists in their work or whether they are in a conflicting relationship involved or not. So such type of questionnaire should be sent to internal auditor, and internal auditor may fill this up. So such type of periodic query may promoting the objectivity. Also, staff assignment rotation. CAE may on regular basis rotate the job of the internal auditor. So the relationship between the auditor and auditee may not be developed, which may uh, uh, arising in a impairment situation. Then refusal to accept material gift. Already I said that if any sort of material gift is offered to internal auditor, then they should not accept such type of gift, and through this act they can maintain and promote objectivity. The review of internal audit work. So after the audit of any work, CA should review all the work paper, or CA may assign any supervisor to review the work paper, other documents and evidence, and through this proper review, it is ensured that internal auditors perform the quality work. They check every evidence, and based on the evidence they are populating the observations. So such way objectivity can be maintained and promoted. Then a strong quality assurance and improvement program uh, the can ensure the objectivity, and also ensuring the policy and procedures can also help in promoting objectivity, because policies may endorse that internal auditors are complying with the code of ethics standards. So such way maintain from objectivity can be maintained and promoted. So today's session is all about that. Hopefully, it will be helpful for your exam preparation. Thanks for watching.